Yes, it is. Thank you very much. So, welcome to this Experts at Work webinar. It's called Rewire Your Brain to Master Any Skill. Which, I mean, I think that's just a great title, isn't it, really? Already you're in, aren't you? This session is for members of all three of our networks. We're recording this session, as you just heard, for our members' YouTube channel. And it's a big welcome to Giulia Raimondino and Yaw Adom. Giulia Raimondino is a brain performance expert, author, and CEO founder of Ingeniously. And Yaw is the managing director there. So there's a bit more intro coming in just a second. It's going to be a highly interactive webinar uncovering the cognitive mechanisms that make you expert, revealing what most people get wrong in cognitive terms on their journey to success, and sharing how to reprogram the brain to learn new skills. I mean, it just sounds excellent. So thank you ever so much for doing this both. Very nice to see you. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. Do send us questions and suggestions via chat throughout. Julia, I'll keep an eye on that. And we'll send Julia's slides around a little bit later. Please put yourselves on mute for now if you haven't already. Julia, over to you. Thank you ever so much again for doing this.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me here, Richard. And I'm very excited to share this knowledge about how to rewire our brain, because there's a lot behind, and I'm going to do my best to stick to the times. But of course, for any question, we'll have a bit of a session afterwards as well. Now, why were we invited to do this? Because as Richard mentioned, I'm the founder of Ingeniously. And most importantly, I think I've had over the last 15 years the chance to really work with thousands of people in terms of how their brain works. So I've coached some TEDx speakers that really wanted to be good at what they did and master the skill. And that's an easy example in terms of public speaking, because that's a skill that we need to master, where our brain needs a lot. But this has also led me to work with psychologists and neuroscientists in order to understand how do we actually help our brain to work the way it's supposed to work. And so today, what is my goal? On one side, what I'd like to do is to help you peek inside the world of brain performance and discover the steps that will help you to reach mastery in any skill. So as I talk, you may see that there will be certain times in which you're thinking about yourself. There will be certain times in which you think about people that you manage, and it's all fine. And you will notice, because my actual goal is for you to take at least one shift. They can help you in your journey as an individual, or to help someone else that may be along that journey or trying to excel at something. And I want to start immediately with one question for all of you, and you can answer in the chat or answer out loud. Everything is fine. And it is this. So if you could choose one superpower to help you achieve your goals, what would it be? And when I say to help you achieve your goals, is because I have my fancy superpower, which is like teleportation. I love to have that and go everywhere in the world. But then if I have to think, okay, which one will help me achieve my goals? Maybe it's not going to be teleportation, it's going to be something else. So for you guys, what would help you achieve your goals? I can see someone's typing time travel. Yes, sometimes people say, Hermione's time turner would be amazing, being able to be more places at once, doing more things. And that's definitely one. At times people tell me mind reading, because, why not? Okay. So we usually have telepathy, being able to communicate with our thoughts. So there's many, right? And if we look at all of them, they're all connected to the greatest asset that we were given as individuals, and that's free, that all of us have, and which is our brain. Our brain is incredibly powerful. I'll give you a couple of numbers just to give you an idea how powerful it is. We have over 86 billion neurons, which is a number that's so big that our brain cannot even picture itself, right? And the interesting thing is that the power comes not even from the neurons, but from the connections between neurons, which is 100 trillion. It's huge. But also, if you think about how fast information travels inside our brain, it's 268 miles per hour. So imagine you're driving on the motorway, and all of a sudden you choose to go 268 miles per hour. That's super, super, super fast. That's how quick information travels. So we have been given this incredible tool that's able to achieve amazing things, but at times we feel it's a bit caged. We don't really know how to use it. And so my superpower of choice would be the ability to use the inner genius that all of us have. Because as a consequence, we could achieve so much more. Maybe we're not going to get to telepathy yet, or to being able to be more places at once, but still the results that we can achieve are incredible. And so when we talk about brain performance, there are several elements that we need to keep into account. We could compare brain performance to fruits on a tree. What does it mean? That if I see the fruit, I see these apples, I may say, okay, they're amazing, they're ripe, they're juicy, they smell good. Or maybe I look at them and I'm like, I don't think they're ready yet, or they're a bit rotten, or they're a bit small, they don't taste that well. And if we try and just pick the fruit and hope that the next one will be better, we're going to be very disappointed. What we need to do is to look at what created that fruit, which is the tree. And what are those elements in terms of brain performance that create our fruit of brain performance? If we look at the tree, the first thing that we'll look at will be the roots, right? So the roots are represented by the thoughts and emotions that we have in relation to brain performance. So let's think about speaking in public, for example. If I want to speak in public, what happens that if my thoughts are, oh my God, everyone is looking at me, I will be terrible, or they will judge me, and what if they don't like me? What happens? Then my emotional state won't be great, and that my performance will suffer from this, even if I have prepared an incredible speech, for example. So thoughts and emotions will be fundamental. Are they enough? Not really, because I may think I'm the greatest public speaker in the world, but there are a series of skills that I need to develop. So I need to have the ability, for example, to articulate my thoughts, connect dots, come up, remember what I want to say, talk in a certain way, use my voice. So there's a series of skills I need to develop. And also there is what I call the ecosystem. What is the ecosystem? It's all those things that we can do for our brain that are not skills related, but that affect it immensely. For example, sleeping, eating properly, hydrating, oxygenating our body, and so on, exercising. Because in the moment in which I have the thoughts in the right place, I've prepared an amazing speech and I have all the skills in the world, but I haven't slept for 2 days in a row. I have eaten a very, very, very heavy lasagna just 2 minutes before, or I have drunk maybe not water, but something else. Of course, my brain performance will suffer from it. So we need to be able to combine all these elements. And during this presentation, we're going to focus on cognitive skills. And the interesting thing is that all these elements will affect each other. So the more I work on my cognitive skills, the more my thoughts and emotions will feel strong. The more the ecosystem, I will feel incentivized in taking care of the ecosystem. Same thing, if I work on each of these elements, they will affect each other positively, okay? So let's start talking about cognitive skills. What is the key to mastering any skill? It lies in what we call the 3A approach. Now, what is the 3A approach? It's three steps, 3 elements that we need to take care of if we want to reach mastery. Nowadays, very often we just focus on doing things because there's so much to do that we jump from one thing to the other, and we don't often stop and see how can I reach a level of mastering that. But if it's true that we can't master everything, there are things that are specific to our profession, that are connected to our goals, our career goals, even relationship goals that we do want to master. So in the 3A approach, what we're going to find is the key to do that. Let's start with the first one. The first one, I'm going to go super, super quick because it's the one that we usually do. And that's acquire. What does acquiring mean? It means that if I want to master a skill, I need to acquire the knowledge and the techniques connected to that skill. Let me make an example. Let's say football. If I want to learn how to play football, I can learn the rules of the game, how it works, and that's the knowledge part. The knowledge part is what I can read from a book, and that's enough. But also techniques. So I may read in the book that I need to kick the ball in a certain way. I may watch videos that show me how to keep my foot, how to run effectively, and so on. Now, this is all good and fundamental, but as we start doing that, we realize that, of course, there is a big gap between knowing and doing. And this is why what we want to do is to have the other 2 A's, which is what we're going to focus on the most. Now, the second A is what is called apply. So we have the knowledge, we have the theory. Now we need to also apply it. But there are very different ways to apply things. Imagine, if I want to become a master at football, will it be enough for me to play football on Sundays with my friends? Probably not. So I will get to a certain level, potentially, but that's not going to make me a champion. The same applies to every skill. Applying doesn't just mean doing what I've learned. Okay, there are different ways in which we can apply things. Let's see what they are. The first way is called naive practice. What is naive practice? It's putting it in practice, like playing on Sundays, reaching a certain level, and then at a certain point, we realize that it becomes particularly hard. And so at that point, it's like, okay, you know what? Football is not for me. I'm never going to be Messi. Let me just move to another skill. Okay. So if we had to guess, is this the way to practice that will help us reach mastery? Probably not. Second way is called purposeful practice. So when we look at purposeful practice, what do we see? It's a type of practice in which I push myself beyond my limit. So I do more than what comes easy to me that day. And I focus my goals on some specific skills. I monitor my progress. And by doing this, what I'm able to do is to create my own mental representations. Now, what are our mental representations? It's the way in which our brain represents that specific skill. So for example, if we keep the example of football for now, imagine that I go to the pitch and instead of just playing with friends, today I focus on kicking penalties. And I start kicking many. So very focused on one skill, okay, focus goals. And I monitor my progress. Okay, this one went well, this one didn't go well. As I do that, my body starts feeling in a certain way. I start realizing that when I use my leg in a certain way, it doesn't work that well. When I place my foot in a certain way, maybe not. The other way, oh, wait, it worked. And I start getting to know myself more. Now, is purposeful practice good? Definitely much better, okay, than naive practice. However, we'll still give it a orange, yellow, okay? It's not green yet. Why? Because there's a type of practice that's even better, and that's the one that we really want to do if we want to reach mastery at anything. And it comes from the 10,000, so puts together some of the studies that were done to come up with the 10,000 hour rule. Has any of you ever heard of the 10,000 hour rule? You can give a thumb up or a hand just so that I can see who of you has heard of it. You can also type in the chat if it's easier. Some of you have. It was made famous by Gladwell, but reality is that the inventor or discoverer, he would say, of the 10,000 hour rule is this gentleman whose name was Anders Ericsson. He passed away a couple of years ago, and he spent his life studying how people really reach mastery. So he started studying people who played violin, people who played chess, people who had incredible memory, and he started identifying what they were doing. That was different from others. He actually got a bit annoyed when he saw about the 10,000 hour rule, because as often happened, when Gladwell made it famous and divulged it, it kind of oversimplified the concept. And so now you may hear a lot of people that say, oh, all you need is to practice for 10,000 hours and you'll be an expert. And Anders Ericsson would say, that's not really the case, okay? So there's a very specific way we need to practice if we want to become an expert. And it's called deliberate practice. Now, deliberate practice starts from purposeful practice, but it has a very, very interesting difference, which is that I build my skills starting from the mental representations that top performers have built. What does it mean? In purposeful practice, I was creating my own mental representations by trial and error. In deliberate practice, what I'm doing is I start from top performers, I use their mental representations, and from there, I start building my own. It's a bit like saying, okay, I interview Messi and I say, what do you do when you kick the ball? How do you feel? What are the skills that I need to develop in order to do that? And I learn from him. So I'm starting from here instead of starting from zero. Instead of just applying trial and error. I actually start from something that has already worked very well in the past. Now, deliberate practice is the one that we want to go for. And it has a series of characteristics that we're going to explore one by one with some examples and understanding how those apply to our brain. So there's 4 main characteristics. So the first one is that we need to start from fundamental skills. What are fundamental skills? They are the building blocks. You can't take a big skill and just work on it. I can't just become a football player. I can't just have the skill playing football. I need to break it down and understand what are all those fundamental skills that I need to develop. And I need to focus on them one at a time. Let's make an example together. When we have to manage people, what are those fundamental skills, those micro skills that we need? We can picture it like this. Any result we want to achieve will require us to develop some skills and put them in place, deploying those skills. Some of these skills are complex, so we can break them down in sub-skills. And then the sub-skills can usually be broken down in micro skills. So based on the complexity of the main skill, we can go down several layers, okay? If the result that I want to achieve is having a successful team, for example, I may require a lot of different skills. One of them will be people management. So if I want to manage people, what are some of the sub-skills that you would recommend? And I'll write them down. So what skills do I need? And we can type them in the chat in order to manage people. What are the first ones that come to mind? Coaching, very good. Empathy. Curiosity. Giving feedback. Being able to motivate people. And so on, okay? Communication, having a strategic view, vision, being able to understand the dynamics that are going on through the team. So there's many, many skills that we may put. Now, if we try and break down most of these, so some of the ones you said are already micro skills. Others are still complex, and that's very good because it will always happen. But the game that we can play whenever we have any skill that we want to develop is, okay, what are the building blocks of this skill? So if I wanted to really break it down so that I can also teach it to others, what would I do? And for example, let's say we take giving feedback, we take motivating others and so on. What we will notice is that the more we break these skills down, the more we will get to cognitive skills that as human beings, we need to develop as building blocks for everything else. Now, specifically, we're going to focus on 4 areas that there's 12 cognitive skills that are to put together in 4 categories that if you start thinking about those, at times you may notice already, okay, my team is lacking a little bit of that, or I personally maybe need to focus on that area a little bit more. So what are those? Efficiency is the first one. So efficiency is our relationship with time. It includes skills such as focus, time management, productivity. So how much can I squeeze out of the same amount of time? Everyone has 24 hours. Some people manage to do more. Some people manage to do less. Some people manage to do a lot, but not have many results because maybe they haven't focused their actions and targeted their actions properly. Some people struggle with focusing and they keep jumping from one thing to the other. And there's some interesting studies that say that anytime we move from one activity to the other, in order to get back to the level of focus we had before, it takes us up to 23 minutes, which is scary for me. It's like, wait, I just checked an email, and by checking a 2-minute email, I've lost 23 minutes of concentration. But there are ways also to repair that because we live in a world in which multitasking is at times required, okay? But that's efficiency. our relationship with time. Then we have acquisition, which is our relationship with learning. So how easy do I find it to acquire information, reading, processing information, making sense of it, manipulating it so that it works in the way my brain understands it, memory, so how much can I retain out of all those things? And this becomes fundamental in a world in which the competence I have today is not enough tomorrow. So we need to keep learning. The third category is evaluation. So how good am I at connecting the dots? So do I see the dots, first of all, attention to detail? And do I connect them in a critical way, so critical thinking, but also thinking outside the box, innovating, being creative, using my lateral thinking? And then we have influence. So it's great to have amazing cognitive skills, but if I'm talking about, for example, giving feedback or motivating others, I'm also interacting with the world. So how well can I use my problem solving, my decision making, and my presentation skills in order to really engage with the world as well? So when we start looking at these 12 cognitive skills, we already have identified a series of building blocks that for a lot of sub-skills and skills will be fundamental. Then, of course, there will be some sub-skills that need all of them. So, for example, if I want to motivate someone or prepare a feedback session for someone, I may need most of them. Some of them are maybe for some other sub-skills, I need less. So if I'm thinking about, for example, let's say coaching, maybe it's a super important skill, but I don't need time management if I'm already able to coach. What I need is the ability to focus on what the actual situation is, the ability to ask questions, being curious, thinking critically, thinking laterally, communicating, and so on. All clear so far? Amazing. So that's the first point, identifying what the fundamental skills are for whatever skill I want to develop. Second thing, comfort zone. So this is the one that a lot of people don't like. In order to reach mastery, I can't stay within my comfort zone. I will need to explore. I will need to go out. And at times this will feel uncomfortable. And I want to show it through a metaphor. So imagine that you are on this road, which is a motorway, and you're driving. And it's in the middle of the forest. You're driving. It's easy. It's effortless. You've done it a lot of times. There's not many turns. So you can also go on autopilot and you still know how to do it, right? At a certain point, though, you realize that this motorway, as comfortable as it is, leads you to a place where you don't want to be. It's leading you to the wrong destination. So what do? We realize that the actual destination where we want to be is in the middle of the forest. So we need to take our machete and start carving a path in the middle of the forest. Now, this path at the beginning is not convenient. It's not comfortable at all. But now we have created it. So where before we only had one option, now we have a fork that wasn't there before. And what happens? That at the beginning, when I get here to this fork, it will still take a lot of effort to take the pathway instead of just going on autopilot on what's easy. But the interesting thing is that our brain is wired to be able to rewire itself. So it's designed to be plastic, to be able to change, to adapt. So it takes awareness. So I need to remember that there's another option. I need to remember that there's a fork on that road that I've created. It takes repeated choice because I need to be present enough not to be on autopilot and to choose to take the difficult route at times. And it takes repeated effort because it's not easy as going on the old motorway that I'm so used to. But once we do that, what happens to our brain, which is amazing, is that one day there's a moment in which the two roads feel as easy. So they both take the same level of effort for me. And if I keep repeatedly choosing the one that leads me to the diamond, at a certain point, the forest will grow back on the old one. And I will not even remember what that felt like. It will be such a faraway memory. It's a bit like when I build a habit. I want to learn how to go to the gym. And at the beginning, it takes so much effort to stand up from the couch, take my stuff, get ready, go. And as I do it repeatedly, there's a moment in which my body, when I don't go to the gym or don't exercise, don't run and so on, it craves it. It's like, wow, that's the easier choice for me rather than just staying at home. So it happens with a skill, it happens with a habit, it happens with emotional reactions. Our brain is wired to be able to rewire itself. But it's a bit uncomfortable at the beginning. It gets easier over time. Third thing is that we need to keep in mind our end goal. So each skill that we create needs to be built on top of the previous ones. I'll make an example. Imagine that you have a brick and I ask you, place this brick on the floor. Now, you have a brick. It could be placed in many different ways, many different directions. Which one is the right one? It depends on what you want to build. Because if what you want to build is a wall, there will be a way that's more efficient than the others. If we don't keep our end goal in mind and we start placing bricks however we feel like, what happens? That once I remember that, oh, wait, I wanted to build a wall, what happens? That I will need to undo a lot of work that I've done. I will have wasted a lot of time, and it will be much more frustrating. With skills, this often happens. For example, when we train people, if they don't have clarity on the end goal for that specific training, what happens? That they take the training, but they're not thinking about how will I apply it? How will I use it? How will it make my life helpful? And at a certain point, they will just retain something, not something else, and maybe they're the wrong things. They need to take the training again, and so on. Having clarity on the end goal helps us to make all our actions and learning more efficient. Okay. Then we have the last bit, which is also connected to what some of you was mentioning in terms of the skills, feedback. Now, if we want to reach mastery in any skill, what we need is to create an immediate feedback loop. And this feedback loop needs to be first external and then internal. So first, the feedback needs to come from the outside. And there needs to be systems in place so that that feedback is given and also received in the right way. There's a moment in which the feedback in the road to mastery can come internally. How do we know when that moment comes? We can understand it by thinking about the 4 levels of competence in any skill. So there's a first level of competence, which is that we are unconsciously incompetent. Okay, that's the moment in which we don't know what we don't know. Example, let's say that I'm just out of university. At university, I have had a few presentations that I had to deliver, so I feel I'm pretty good at presenting. All of a sudden, I'm asked at work to give a presentation to some senior stakeholders. Given that I've already given some presentations, I assume, more or less it'll be the same. And I don't realize that there's so many dynamics that are different. The rules of the game are different. The way I need to present the end goal, the type of communication are different. So what happens? That I really don't know what I don't know. But as I start preparing for it, someone shows me how it should be, what I'm doing wrong, I get to the level of consciously incompetent. So I'm still not able to do everything right, but I know that I'm doing wrong. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. So now I'm aware that I'm not doing it right, but I wouldn't be able to know why I'm doing it wrong. So what are all the elements that I need to keep in mind? So I'm still incompetent, but I'm aware of the fact that I am incompetent, that for now. Then I keep working at it. I keep receiving feedback, and I get to the point in which I become consciously competent. So that's the moment in which I can do it, but it still requires a lot of mental effort. And at times I do it wrong, but I realize I've done it wrong. So I know that there are things that I don't know, and I'm able to ask for help when needed because I'm aware of what I should know. At times, it's still not automatic, so I will still make mistakes, and I will not be unconsciously competent yet. Then we get to unconsciously competent, which is when we have mastered it. So it's just second nature for us. Now, when do we need to give external feedback or ask for external feedback if we are the ones learning a skill? we need to do it up to halfway through consciously competent. So up to halfway through consciously competent, we are not able to see the mistakes that we're making. We're not able because we don't have enough experience to see them. So we need someone that has the patience to show us what we can do better. Once we get to consciously competent for a while, then there's a moment in which we realize, okay, I know I've done this wrong. I don't know if any of you has ever learned a foreign language and spoken it pretty fluently, but for example, I'm Italian, as for sure you haven't noticed from my accent, but I'm Italian. And so when I had to learn English, at the beginning, I didn't realize the mistakes I was making. I was just speaking. And there was a moment in my consciously competent phase in which I realized that, okay, wait, I don't know how to say it. How should I say it correctly? Maybe I wasn't sure. So I would ask. Or times in which I made a mistake, and this happens also now that I'm unconsciously competent, in which I make a mistake and then my brain immediately goes, wait, you didn't put the S where it should have been, so my brain already recognizes it. It doesn't mean that you can't ask for external feedback when you're unconsciously competent, but a lot of the feedback can come internally at that point. You have enough experience for that. Okay. So by using these 4 elements when we practice, that's when the practice that we're putting in will actually lead us to mastery. Okay. And we have a third element, a third A, which is adapt. So adapting means that every single individual is different. And we know that. No 2 individuals are the same. But this means also that no 2 individuals learn things in the same way. So in terms of adapting, what do we need to do? And probably came to mind already when I was talking about feedback, we need to find a good mentor. We need to find someone that's willing to give us feedback and help us. Now, when I say good mentor, what I mean is that a good mentor should have 3 characteristics. If they don't have all these 3, it's going to be hard to reach mastery. The first one is that they need to be consistent. What does it mean? In this case, it means that they need to have achieved results in that thing. So imagine you go and try to learn how to speak in public from someone that is terrified by speaking in public. It doesn't work, okay? It needs to be someone that is able to do that thing that you want to do. It doesn't mean that they need to be the best champion, because potentially Messi, going back to the example from before, may be a terrible mentor, okay? And we'll see, because maybe there's characteristic 2 and 3 that are fundamental as well. But they need to be good enough to understand where you want to go. They need to have done it themselves. Second thing, they need to be competent. What do I mean? Competent not as at that skill, competent as a mentor, which is different. So they need to be aware of the mental representations that you need to achieve that result. Now, this is fundamental. At times you ask people that are incredible at what they do, how did you do it? And they have no clue. They're like, I just did it. I don't know. And this is, irrelevant for them. If they're already talented, great for them. But it means that they're not great mentors at all, because they don't have the ability that can be learned. It's another skill, but to break down what they've done and understand, okay, what are my mental representations? At times in the past, maybe there were some salespeople in my team that were achieving incredible results, selling, everyone was buying. And people were asking, what did you do? What did you tell them? Like, I don't know, I just connected and they bought. It's like, okay, that's great for you, but how do I connect? And so we need someone that's able to break those down and identify the mental representations so that they can teach them to us. And we have that starting point that deliberate practice needs. Third characteristic is coaching. So they need to be able to adapt those mental representations to you. So a good mentor not only is aware of their own mental representations, but they can understand the way for how you work, you need to make that tweak. Thinking about football, for how your body is shaped, this is what you should focus on more. It's not the same for everyone. They need to be able to adapt, whether it is cognitively or body-wise. If it's a PT, they will need to understand that for each body type, for example, there's a different type of training that will work better. And if a mentor has these 3 characteristics, they can really help someone else to reach mastery. And if we are mentors and we realize, wait, maybe at times I don't have clarity on the mental representations, that's something that can be built. we need to start asking ourselves the question, okay, what are the building blocks? How do I feel when I'm doing that thing? What am I thinking when I'm doing that thing? What are those thoughts, emotions, and actions that are helping me to achieve that result? Not just the action, but also the thoughts and emotions that we saw before are at the root of any result. Any questions so far? No? So I'm going to close by recapping the 3 A's, okay, so that we have them there all clear. So the first one is acquire. So we need to acquire the knowledge and the techniques. So both the things that we can read on books and the things that our mind or body need to do in order to achieve that result. Second A was, let's see if someone wants to type it in the chat. We go back to our notes. Apply, very good. So applying means applying which type of practice? Deliberate practice with all the characteristics that we discussed. And then thirdly, we have the third A, which is adapt. We need to be able to adapt that skill to our own abilities. And so find a mentor that helps us to do that at the beginning until we're able to do it ourselves. Now, in the short time that we had, I tried to put enough content that you could bring away. My recommendation would be to really take the skill that you want to become great at and identify what are the sub skills that require some deliberate practice right now. Maybe I am managing people and I'm great at what I'm doing, but what I would like to do is to be able to communicate a little bit better when I give feedback. Okay, so what are the elements to that? How can I practice that? Low stakes first, so easy practice where there's not too high stakes involved, and then moving on towards higher stakes. That being said, I'll be happy to connect on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to me, just mention this workshop so that I know that this is how you met me. And I hope that you got a lot of value, and I guess we can open the Q&A session.
Thanks ever so much, Giulia. I love the structure and the clarity and also the energy you brought to that. That was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed that and learned a lot. Could I trouble you just close it? Oh, thank you, done it. That's brilliant. Thank you. So if you go to participants, if you go to React, forgive me if you didn't know this already, go to React and then you'll see it comes up to raise hand. So if you hit that and raise your hand, or if that fails, just raise your hand, or just dip in. We'd love to hear your questions and points. Is there something that you've learned that you'd like to share with the group and how you did that? Maybe it worked very well, or maybe it didn't work so well, and what you learned from that lack of learning, if you will. Anything that Giulia said that you'd like to hear more about, pick up on. This is your chance. And Giulia, thanks again. That was fab. Paula, how you doing? We can't quite hear you, Paula. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I tucked it back because I was worried. Sorry. Let's try again. Very thought-provoking.
That was adapting.
Exactly. Great session. Something I've been thinking about recently, particularly with my team, but also with me, is about relearning skills. And I think one thing that we've been talking about as a team is about focus. And I'm not sure whether everybody else feels the same. And I don't know whether it's aftermath of COVID or just the world of HR, but my world is really busy. Like we go from one meeting to another. So that thing you said earlier about that 23 minutes, right? About swapping. And some of the meetings are really different, right? So you go from maybe a complex HR issue to learning something to then presenting. And at the same time, I've got my Teams popping up, bing, 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 bing. While I've been on here, I've got 17 Teams messages. And then you've got your little emails coming up. And it's really hard, I think, to focus. And so one of the things we've been talking about is how do you retrain your brain to focus on one thing, be present? I'm just wondering, does this technique, is that the same for the retraining as much as learning something new?
Great question.
Amazing question. So I think that focus nowadays, from our experience, is the skill that people need the most, or as a perception. So they when we ask people what skills do you need out of these 12, like focus is the top one. And the reason is that this world may partly because of lockdown and how the way of working has changed, partly because of how the world has changed. We have so many stimuli all the time. We have unlearned how to actually be present and focused, and we are forced to jump from one thing to the other. So it is super foundational skills that helps with everything else. There are ways to learn. So in terms of how to relearn in general, the process is the same. So there are some exercises that people can do in order to develop their focus more. And I'll be happy to have a chat about that. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a complex topic to discuss in 5 minutes, but I may have some articles that I can share with you. Maybe, I don't know if Richard, you can send it on that, because they can be a starting point. But focus is composed of a series of things that we can focus on. Fun, not even. So the first one is our thoughts and emotions. So the reason why very often where we lack focus is that emotionally we are stressed, in a rush, overwhelmed, tired. And so what happens is that our brain cannot focus when we are in that state. So regaining that presence, if you think about the slide of the forest with the road.
The ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. It's a part of the ecosystem. Which means also supporting it through sleep, hydration, that those things do magic in terms of focus, but also thoughts and emotions. So when there is that autopilot that kicks in, and just, for example, the autopilot could be, I jump into a new meeting directly. So I close one and go there, or I check all the notifications without really being present because I'm thinking about something else. Those are all autopilots. We need to identify them and diffuse them by bringing ourselves back to being present. And there are many ways to do that. 2 quick things I could say is using your breath for that. So really consciously bringing your breath down, making it deeper in that moment before starting a new activity. So it's like I take a deep breath and I set an intention. Our brain is incredibly focused when it knows the direction. So setting an intention, even just as simple as in this meeting, I want to really listen to what the person is saying, or I want to convey this message, or now I want to read all my emails in this time, brings our mind to actually do that much easier than if we don't set the intention. It takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds, but it already brings us back. The concept of focus, literally, focus was the fireplace, the earth. So it's a concept of bringing ourselves back to our center.
Yeah.
It means that when we are not focused, is because we're not in our center, but we are everywhere else. Our attention is pulled everywhere else. So it's about bringing ourselves back. By a deep breath helps because it's internal. It brings us in necessarily when we focus on it. And then setting an intention that comes from us to the outside. It's not the outside that's coming to us. So these 2 things can already help. And if we practice them deliberately, that will already help a lot with our focus. I hope it helps.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a complimentary question? And thanks again, Paula, from Gareth. Gareth was saying, how do you manage distractions to avoid the 23-minute setback? Which it feels like a complimentary question, but Giulia, do say if it's actually the same question for you in terms of the answer.
So there are actually strategies that we can apply to manage that. And one that I can share quickly is what we call the distraction sheet. So the problem with our brain is that in the moment in which, let's say I'm writing an email to someone and I receive a notification, or let's make it even internal distractions, because those are also very frequent. So let's say I'm writing an email to someone and all of a sudden I remember that I didn't reply to someone else's text. At that point, we can't unsee that. So it's a fork in front of us, and either I continue writing the email with the risk of forgetting the message again, or I write the message, but then I'm losing my 23 minutes. What do I do? So we need to give our brain a way to handle that. And the easiest way is to create a distraction sheet. So a note on the phone, on a sheet of paper, where we note down text message. Okay. This simple action allows us to do what? I can keep writing my email, but instead of having part of my attention that goes to remember to write the message, remember to write the message, remember to write the message, my attention is fully on the email. And instead of going and writing the email, the message, and losing 23 minutes, I'm finishing my email first. The simple act of writing a keyword down doesn't distract us enough to activate those 23 minutes. So at that point, we have our list that we can deal with later. But our brain knows that it's not going to get lost. So this is a simple strategy, but incredibly effective. I was working with, I don't know if you know Atos, it's a big company in software. And I did a training there, and we had a follow-up session later, and I explained complex things and so on. And then when I talked with one of them, it was like, Giulia, that thought parking lot really changed my life. and it was the distraction sheet, because it said, now I can actually deal with those things, and my focus has improved a lot. Sometimes the simplest things help the most.
That's a really nice technique. Did you also call it a thought parking lot?
I don't, but he was American.
Oh,
So
fair enough.
it does work because you park your thoughts.
No, both are good. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, that's a good question. And Paul and Gareth are already starting distraction sheets. Excellent work. It's a non-distraction sheet as well, isn't it? Because you're making sure you're not distracted, I guess. But
Exactly.
please do. Let's have some more questions. While people are thinking, I just want to ask one, which is basically, in your experience, Giulia, what do you see are the most common mistakes or the most common routes not taken, if you will, when it comes to cognitive skills? When people are trying to learn something, what do you often see people sort of taking the wrong route, as it were?
So there's many that come to mind as you talk. So the first one that comes to mind is when they don't make their learning strategic. So nowadays, a lot of people just jump from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other, and they stay very superficial.
Okay.
And they waste a lot of energy like that, because they try to learn too many things at once. And our brain is wired to be good at focusing on one at a time. So that mistake, people pay for it. So they think they're improving 10 things, and in the end, the improvement is really not much. And so they get frustrated and motivated, and it affects the future as well. So making it strategic, identifying, okay, what do I actually need? I was reading some stats that Harvard created about the fact that 20 to 40% of people are not really aware of what skills they need in their own role.
Oh.
Let's go with what is fancy right now, but they don't really identify what is actually needed. And so they feel they wasted their time afterwards. So that would be the first one that comes to mind. And then giving up. When things get hard, a lot of people give up. Others stress out, and neither strategy works. The best option is to really analyze and then strategize for success. So having that, being willing to take that road that's less traveled and that's a bit uncomfortable, but with strategy.
Oh, great answer. Great answer. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Giulia. Well, let's go on to the network members, actually. In your teams, in your organizations, do you think people know what skills they need? Because if 20 to 40% don't, there is a fair chance that perhaps in your organizations they don't, if you see what I mean. And if not, what sort of things do you feel they should be doing in terms of addressing that?
I can just jump in from my world. So in terms of the technical skills are very quite specific around what you need for your job as a regulator. So in that regard, I think the area where it goes more grey for colleagues is in the behaviour space, the how bit.
Okay.
They may not always realise they need a different skill or behaviour to deliver something than what they deem the role to be. So you can get a bit of a conflict between I'm a regulator and I need to act this way rather than the way we would like them to act in that space. So sometimes that's lost slightly, but we can do more. And sometimes it's for us as well around the future skills, how being on top of it so that we can know what we're going to need before we actually need it and start getting the people to think about that so that when they land and they're ready when we need them as well. So we're doing a bit more. We've been doing some work around future capabilities as well, which is quite interesting as well, because you see things like AI and stuff, where does that fall into the world of a regulator in 5 years time and things like that? And you've got people that are very used to a way of working, and that might be very different to them. So again, you've got to be able to take them on that shift. So there's that situation of they think it should be done this way, and then we sometimes have a challenge of getting them to shift to a new world, especially if they've been doing a role. I've been a regulator as a flight ops inspector for 20 years. You now want me to do it a different way. They're the more challenging ones. People bringing in, we can shape a lot easier, but it's longer term employees, I think, are the bigger challenge in this area, particularly.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Is it just on that note, just quickly, because there's a lot of talk at the moment, very understandably, about how we define future skills. And I always think it's a really sensible question to ask, but it must be a heck of a difficult one to answer. How have you found it, Rachel, in terms of defining those future skills?
I delegated that job.
Got
No. So we did do quite a lot of horizon scanning out into the business and it's working very closely with the business, understanding from their lens on what's coming, and combine that with the corporate piece that we need. People that may be more data led is an easy one, right? You can say actually that works, but there'd be more specifics that are maybe unique to a particular area that you might need to see more of. And us sitting in our HR bubble alone, we wouldn't get the right answers to that. So we've done a whole project that's gone out to a dedicated project going out to ask this question and have identified what we believe are the skills we require in X amount of time.
Yeah.
And then it's the so what bit, isn't it? When you've established that, it's then, okay, how are we going to get there?
Yes, gotcha. Great answer. Makes a lot of sense. HR as facilitator in a sense and drawing on the sort of on the business basically. Well, I'm just mindful actually of what Giulia was saying earlier on, that it's on Porter particularly where you've got your back-to-back meetings. So we can maybe just have a little bit of a 4 or 5 minute
You're
break.
giving us 5 back.
Yeah, I know. But I just wanted to say, Giulia, you were great to work with. Thank you ever so much. It's really interesting what you're doing at Ingeniously. Giulia, great presentation. Loads of great answers as well. Thank you. We put you on the spot with quite a few questions there, but your answers were really precise and helpful. So we'll send the slides around and the recording. Lovely to see you, network members. Thank you ever so much for coming along. And Giulia and Yaw, thanks again. Great to work with you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.